So this has definitely been the best lead up to my presentation I've ever been a part of. You guys just do so much work, and so much of it not only sounds cool, but also inspiring. So kudos to you. It's easy for someone like me to come do this presentation to a group of people who all get together under the motto of service above self. And Alex, thanks for the intro. You have eliminated my third slide, so we'll get to spend more time on the important stuff. But let me fire this up real quick. Can everybody see my desktop?
We're good to go.
Okay. So the question that I want you to think about today as business owners or employees is, how do we today as business owners attract and retain consumers and employees in a hyper-competitive marketplace and workplace? And Alex already went over all this, except for the fact he left off probably the most important part of my history, which was when I was 17, I was snagglepuss at Kings Island. And I have no use for this photo other than for this slide to kind of lighten it up a little bit. But Alex, you did a great job of kind of going through my history, my professional trajectory. So I'll skip right over this and jump into Simon's Heart. Simon's Heart was an organization my wife and I started 16 years ago. Simon was 3 months old. He was taking a nap and he didn't wake up. As a result of that, we got our hearts checked. My wife found out she had a heart condition that's been linked to SIDS. It's also one of a handful of conditions that can cause students, particularly student athletes, to collapse and die. So we launched this nonprofit and started doing things like heart screenings and putting AED devices into places where kids learn and play, teaching kids how to do chest compressions / CPR, using kickballs and playlists to make it more fun and engaging. But it's also a time when I served as executive director for 8 years, where I was able to really work with some cool brands and not just ask them for their financial support or the quick transaction, but to really find ways that we could integrate our mission into their business. And that's what really gets me excited. So of all of these, I'll talk to you about the flyers real quick. You know, our mission was preventing sudden cardiac arrest and death, or sudden death. And hockey fans know that probably the most exciting part of a hockey game is sudden death overtime. So in partnering with the Flyers, we would raise awareness during that period. And every time the Flyers entered sudden death overtime, we would donate an AED device to a local youth facility. So it got the Flyers out into the community, helped protect the lives of kids and the adults that worked in these schools, and just showed the fans that they were more than just selling tickets. And that's what I really want to emphasize here today. And so let's set the stage real quick, because we're going to talk about marketing a little bit, about HR and recruiting and retaining talent. So to get us all on the same page, hold on a second, I'm having a little malfunction here. Okay, so what do consumers typically hear when companies are talking to them? The messages that I get are that we have the best prices, the widest selection, we have the most experienced workforce, we have really cool endorsements, and great customer service. And these are things that usually facilitate transactions, not much connection between the consumers and the companies. And there's research to show that humans are actually driven by feelings, not necessarily facts. And so if businesses want consumers or prospects to connect with the product or brand, they have to be a little bit more dimensional than just best prices and widest selection. They have to give them something that will allow them to connect with their company. And the same thing holds true on the HR side of things. That when managers look at employees as self-interested individuals and only talk about things like bonuses, stock options, extra vacation incentives, you actually end up creating a self-fulfilling prophecy where the employee is only seeking out that end instead of becoming committed to the company and to their performance. So how do we address these two things? We don't abandon them because they're still useful, but how do we address them and make our messaging more compelling and create more connections with all these parties? We align a company with a cause based on values, customs, missions, or backstories for the purpose of increasing profits and improving society. Now, I'm pretty sure that everybody on this meeting today is generous with their time and their money, and you probably all work with or for companies that are the same. So this is a conversation about, can we be more intentional and authentic with the ways that we give and engage in philanthropy, rather than just necessarily reacting to opportunities that might arise. So there's a couple things driving this this change, my whole premise about injecting cause into companies. And that is, the first thing is that there's a new generation in charge. In 2016, the Millennials became the largest generation in the labor force. And there's a big shift in the way that they think and what inspires them. The second factor was something called the Business Roundtable, which is a collection of 181 major corporations in our country. They have been in an environment over the past several decades where the focus was on shareholders. This was basically formulated by an economist in the 70s, where the only responsibility a corporation had was to its shareholders. And that's broken down over time very slowly. But in 2019, these CEOs got together and they shifted their way of thinking. And they said, we're going to move away from the shareholder mentality and focus on stakeholders, all the people who are involved in our business and served by our business. So instead of just going quarter to quarter and trying to drive up profits and make your shareholders happy, now the values are delivering values to customers, investing in employees, dealing fairly and ethically with suppliers, supporting the communities where they work, and generating long-term value for shareholders. This is a huge shift, and I'm hoping that this will start to drive the way that companies engage with issues and their communities. We also have some data talking about the new generations, the Millennials and Gen Z, and it really touches on things like job satisfaction and how to conduct business and drive profits. And so I want to share some of these data points with you as well. So 71% of employees feel disconnected from their job emotionally and behaviorally. And I'm sure that you will all join me in saying that if you go to work one day and you're feeling kind of meh, your job performance is probably going to suffer as a result of that. Well, if our employees, our coworkers, don't feel connected with the company or their job, that's going to definitely affect performance and satisfaction. And so what that does is that creates a problem with retention. Data shows that 40% of employees are considering leaving their current job. And this isn't a statistic that was created during COVID. We know that now that number might even be higher. This has to do with that prior slide of just not feeling connected. So that's not only devastating financially for our companies, but it's also very taxing on our economy. And the way that we've looked at companies has shifted too. So 73% of consumers believe a company can take actions that increase profits and improve the communities at the same time. So it's no longer an either or probably more common, I'll write the check, I'm the company, you guys can figure out the solutions. This is, hey, companies, you have to really figure this out, how to do both at the same time. And then purpose. CEOs, this shouldn't be a surprise after looking at that slide about the Business Roundtable, but 89% of executives believe that a strong sense of collective purpose drives employee satisfaction. So how can we take all this data and the shift that the CEOs at the Business Roundtable presented us with and incorporate cause into our companies? So there's a cause formula that I want to share with you. And that requires, the first element is you need a company and a nonprofit. But when you're starting this exercise, you should not look for nonprofit specifically, but just consider the cause. And what is the shared X, those values, those backstories, the missions, the skill set of the employees? What is that? And then how can that connect to the cause? Once you do that, you can drill down and find the nonprofit that you can pair with. The second element here is what is going to activate consumers and employees? Because that's one of the big paybacks that a company will enjoy in supporting a relevant cause is how is it going to get customers, clients, prospects excited about working with your company because now you do more than just sell widgets or services. And how are the employees going to have that sense of collective purpose? What's going to inspire them to come to work in addition to doing their job so they don't become dissatisfied and leave? And then the campaign should be long-term. This should be something that your company really embraces and believes in and isn't just doing it for a transactional quick hit purpose. And so the outcome of this is, increased profits for the company and bettering of society through supporting a mission. Now, there are a couple problems that can arise from this scenario. And that is when companies try to jump on a bandwagon instead of really furthering their values. And we've seen a lot in the last few years with racial injustice and voting rights. And a lot of companies come out and speak out because they feel either it's tied to their values and that's who they are, or because they think that society wants them to. They're responding to things. And consumers and prospects and employees can see through that. So it has to be authentic. You have to be pursuing your values and you can't just jump on a bandwagon. And then lip service versus actions are very different too. To put a real life scenario into this statement, there were billions of dollars that were committed to social injustice following the death of George Floyd. A couple months ago, there was a follow-up journalistic piece that showed that there were a whole lot of pledges made, but not so much money deployed. And so that stuff will get revealed. And not only will that not help you connect with causes, but it'll help you alienate the very people that maybe you're trying to attract. And then again, we touched already on, it's much more meaningful and credible when a campaign like this is sustained because it's something that is supported by the values of your company. So these next few slides are going to explore some ways that different sized companies engage in giving or philanthropy. And what we typically see with a small business, and these are not exhaustive lists, is a small business might do things like this: sponsor a little league activity, donate to a church, maybe personally as a CEO, maybe provide an auction item for a gala. These are all great things. These make a difference in people's lives, but these don't necessarily help the business tell a story, create a narrative, connect with consumers and employees. So here's another way to approach the same kind of thing. The Chimney Scientist is a Conshohocken-based company, and I've discovered them on the web. I use them to clean my chimney. And the cool thing about this is that the CEO is a microbiologist turned chimney specialist. So he's leveraging his passion and training in science and connecting with causes like don'tmovefirewood.org and the Valley Forge watershed. And when you hear about his training, and then you hear about the causes that he's aligning with, coupled with the fact that you burn wood in a chimney, it makes pretty logical sense that they would do that. And that's the formula that I'm trying to share with you, is that these are authentic connections that this CEO, that this company has with these causes. And I think it does so much more. It empowers him and his company to go out, tell a story, and show that they are beyond just transactions. And in case you are as ignorant as I am about don't move firewood, if you take firewood from point A and move it 30 miles away to point B, you could be introducing different contaminants into a new ecosystem. I did not know that there was such a thing. So, you know, that's the cool thing about a cause, is you can discover new things every day. So mid-sized company, engaging in similar things to the small size, they just have a little bit more money and maybe a little bit more time. So these are the kinds of things that they would engage in. And again, these are meaningful. I'm not putting these things down, but a more intentional approach might be a 200-person company that develops apps for Fortune 500 companies. Their workforce is full of designers and developers. So that workforce can really be deployed to mentor kids and trying to bridge the digital divide. So they've partnered with 3 nonprofits in the different cities where they are located, and regularly go to these places to mentor kids, teach them about technology, not only so that they can navigate school, but they can also think about their careers. But they also host them in the offices. So a much more meaningful way for this company to engage and give back. And then finally, major corporations have lots of resources. So they typically engage in gestures such as these, a way to make it maybe a little bit more authentic and intentional would be to look at FS Investments, which is based here in Philadelphia. They are not big in terms of employee size, but they manage $10 billion of assets, which makes them big in my mind. And they have created their own program called Philadelphia Financial Scholars, where they are teaching parents and children in the inner city about fiscal responsibility and creating entrepreneurship opportunities for students to try and break the poverty cycle and change the trajectory of their lives. So one other concept that I know all of you think about a lot, but I'd like for businesses to think about it a little more, and that is about purpose. And a lot of times when people hear the word purpose, they think about retreats and incense and meditating, which is all positive, but I'm not here to talk to you about that or convince you to do something like that. I just think that if you tweak your mission statement a little bit, you could very easily start to follow a purpose instead of just following day-to-day transactions. So let's imagine for a second an insurance company, and their mission statement might be, we want to create value for the company by providing comprehensive coverage to protect consumers. Now, I think this makes sense. To me, this would look good on a business plan, but this is very limiting. This really only opens the door to employees being able to sell lots of policies that provide protection, right? That's all the mission calls for. But if that same insurance company were to think a little broader and perhaps change the statement to, we want to protect every family from the accidents, mishaps, and disasters of life, they would still be able to sell policies that provide protection, but it would open up the door for them to being able to educate, teach about prevention, embrace technology, or perhaps things of maintenance around the house. And to borrow a real life example from Simon's Heart, my organization, it allows me to approach an insurance company and say, hey, you guys are involved in mitigating risk. That's what you're around for. And we're trying to mitigate risk against sudden death. So why don't we work together and put AED devices into places where kids learn and play? A company with a mission of protecting families from accidents, mishaps, and disasters of life might be more open-minded to that pitch, that philosophy, than a company that's just about selling coverage to protect customers. And so one company that I always put on a pedestal because I'm fascinated by what it does and what it's become is Chobani. And Chobani's mission statement, there's a little bit of a lag here, I'm sorry. So Chobani's mission statement is, Chobani is a food maker with a mission of making high quality and nutritious food accessible to more people while elevating our communities and making the world a healthier place. I think that's great. It could have just been, we want to sell lots of yogurt. But Hamdi Ulukaya, the CEO, and if you haven't watched his TED Talk, I encourage you to do it. It's only about 10 minutes. He's pretty smart. He knows that the media is not going to talk about yogurt. They're going to talk about the deeds that they do, the things that they accomplish in the community. And so let's look at those deeds for a second. This company started in 2005. Back in that time, Hamdi sold feta cheese. Right around 2005, he bought a plant up in upstate New York that had been abandoned by Kraft, who was also making yogurt. So he's a little crazy, right? Because if Kraft can't make yogurt, how's he going to be able to make yogurt? But in this process over the last 15 years, he's revitalized an entire town. He's opened up a second plant in Idaho, revitalized that town. He gave away 10% of his company to his employees. Because he's a Turkish refugee, he made a commitment to hire refugees and immigrants. And now he's got $1.5 billion in annual revenue. And he is the #2 manufacturer of yogurt in the world. So a lot of times when we talk about cause, we hear about big companies like Unilever and Subaru. And it's easy to say, oh, they're really big, they have resources. But this guy didn't even have a plant 16 years ago. So I like this story because no matter where any of us are on our company trajectory, if he can do something like this in 16 years, there's no reason why we can't. And so how do you start to imagine your deeds if you find and align with that cause? You can increase employee engagement, perhaps have customers that are more loyal, increase referrals because prospects view you as being multidimensional and more interesting than just somebody who's out there trying to make a buck. Increase productivity because your employees are more engaged, and get far more recognition because if you sell yogurt, the press doesn't want to talk about you selling yogurt. And then what could be the impact for that cause that you align with? You would increase volunteers, increase money raised. If that nonprofit is perhaps pursuing legislation, maybe you guys help get a law passed. Or maybe if it's scholarship or mentorship, maybe you help students graduate. So there's all kinds of different metrics you can use to not only fill your own bucket, but share with the world. And so I think you guys are all pretty well versed in this because you're part of an organization that seeks to serve. But these are some of the ways that you can start to explore what cause is right for your company. And then I always close with a quote of an astronaut. And he says, I think if people who work for a business are proud of the business they work for, they'll work much harder. And therefore, I think turning your business into a real force for good is good business sense as well. And that also applies not only to employees, but consumers, prospects, and clients. So that is the end of my formal presentation, which is usually 2 hours full of videos and stuff. So I hope I kept it substantive enough for you in the 15, 20 minutes that I presented, but I would love to get your thoughts, reactions, and ideas.
May
Let me
I
stop
begin?
sharing so I can see everybody.
Darren, that was a great presentation, and I am so curious to know why your agency is called Unless. So could you start there? And then I'm also curious how your agency helps these businesses. And was your agency behind those three examples you gave of matching the business with the cause that they could then support?
Yes. Okay. So the first question, how did I get the name of my business? So um, in my longer presentation, I go over this. Milton Friedman was the economist in 1970 who wrote the famous paper about companies only have a social responsibility or only responsibility to the shareholders. Um, and obviously, I was born in 70, so I didn't get too much Milton Friedman in my life. But in 1971, Dr. Seuss wrote the book The Lorax. And in that book, in the last page, there's a quote that says, "Unless someone like you cares a whole awful lot, nothing is going to get better. It's not." And my parents read that to me all the time. And it's kind of been a quote that stuck with me. So I thought it'd be kind of fun and relevant to what I'm doing to name my company after that. Second question, the examples I gave of the chimney, willow tree, and FS Investments. No, I have either done business with them or I am friends with leadership at those companies. They did these things before I was ever around. Unless has been around for 9 months. I stepped down as executive director of Simon's Heart in a year ago, September. And so this was the thing that I created for the next chapter of my life.
Great. Okay. And so then how would a company hire your agency? What services could you provide then?
Great question. So the first thing I do is talk to the people of influence and find out what problem they're trying to solve. And then I take them on a kind of a self-reflection journey to get reacquainted with their company, why it started, what its value add is, the skill sets of their workforce. And through that exploration, then start to introduce causes that I think resonate. So going back to the willow tree example, my friend started the company. It's full of designers and developers. So the logical nexus for me is, well, let's use that workforce and connect them with kids to bridge the digital divide, instead of just going to a soup kitchen once a year, which again is nice, but I don't think it does as much to promote what your business is about and how it can really change the world.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Darren, I have a question. And you brought this up earlier with Milton Friedman. And then I love the example of the Lorax. So the idea of a stakeholder versus a shareholder. So I went to school for finance. So basically, I was brainwashed about that statement you made about shareholders. Is there? I have to imagine that if a company focuses on stakeholders, that it also we would need shareholders to be sort of enlightened to this idea. Are there success stories with publicly traded companies that have adopted this and really stuck to it? And
Oh, sure.
Can we trace performance, to that from a
Oh,
financial
sure.
perspective?
Yeah. So Unilever, one of the biggest companies in the world, has embraced, they now own Ben& Jerry's, which is one of the leaders in cause marketing, but they own a whole host of brands and they've really embraced cause marketing. And there's a lot of data too to show that in the past handful of years, companies that have purpose connected to their mission are performing as well as companies that are not. So there's plenty of data out there, and since I'm sensing that you're, I mean this affectionately, kind of nerdy about Milton Friedman a little bit. I'll go a little deeper, and that is, if you read that paper, his position is we can only do things that are going to benefit the shareholders, and but as we know today, your company performs better when your employees are happy and productive and healthy. And so if you can take steps that might in the 1980s been considered of just writing a check in charity, if you can take those same steps and show how they impact the performance of your workforce, or the affinity that you have with consumers because they see that you care about the people who live in their community, and that increases profits. I think if Milt were still alive today, he might have softened up a little bit.
No, that's perfect. Thank you.
I have a question, Darren. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good, thanks. I've been a Rotarian for over 20 years now. And back in those days, especially with the Philadelphia Club, we had a lot of corporate members where the companies paid for their memberships. That seems to have disappeared. I don't know if you're seeing any trends in that direction again. I really love the whole, stakeholder versus shareholder thing, because it seems like for the last 20 years, most companies have just focused on profits at the expense of people and charities and doing good in the communities. Thoughts on that?
Yeah. So I have no data on that. I didn't even know it was a thing until you just mentioned it. But my best guess would be that 20 years ago, during those robust Milton Friedman days, Rotary Club was the outlet, right? That's how a company could show, oh, we care, we give back. We have, we send 2 people to the Rotary Club, because that's what you guys have always done. Hopefully what's happened is they might not be members anymore, but maybe they're doing more independently. That's what I want to believe. I don't want to believe that they just cut you guys out and now they do nothing.
Maybe this is off topic a bit, but to follow up on Jeff's great question, I mean, I think what I have seen is that the corporations have launched their own volunteer service day, where they will all go to the food bank together with all their employees. And maybe those are some of the people that might have been attracted to Rotary, but now they feel they can give back by way of just being in their office or being a part of this bigger company. So that's where I think some of our membership numbers have gone down because of that. But anyway, great presentation. Thanks.
Darren, to echo on that, I think it's interesting because part of this I feel like is not necessarily looking to an intermediary to do good on your behalf. It's to actually own the responsibility. So I would think probably offline conversation. Jeff, my thought is perhaps it's the duty is to expose people to the idea, and then it's our personal responsibility to sort of actually act on that for those who are in the position to do so as like a small business owner. Anyway, good food for thought there. Guys, do we have any other questions? I wrote down a few. We'll keep it going, so this isn't just me talking with Darren. Darren, you and I could catch up some other time. All right, so as a token of our appreciation, Darren, it sounds like you're familiar with Rotary and you did some research on us, so you know that the eradication of polio is a big deal for Rotary. And in your honor, what we'd like to do is make a donation to vaccinate 20 children in the few countries where this still exists to eradicate polio. And we'll make this donation in your honor to 20 children.
That's super cool. Again. Thank you so much.